Republicans in Congress have introduced a new bill which would strip all federal funding, that's loans, grants, everything, from any medical school that acknowledges systemic racism or has a diversity office at all. This is called H.R. 3518, and it's getting very little coverage. And it essentially says if a medical school talks about privilege or racism or health disparities along diversity lines, which is very real, by the way, they lose funding, period. So here is what the bill bans. No DEI offices allowed, no diversity statements in hiring or in admissions, no instruction suggesting that racism exists in American systems, no special programming based on race and ethnicity. And if you do any of that, you're out of every federal student loan and grant program that exists for medical schools. This is not a joke. This is the Republican Party trying to legislate ideological conformity into the medical field. Now, here's the thing. These so-called woke practices, as they describe them, there's a reason that they're standard in modern medical education. Medical schools teach about racial health disparities because they exist. Now, you and I might have different opinions as to, are there DEI programs that are well-intentioned but go too far? Or are there examples? We can have that conversation, but racial health disparities exist. And so why wouldn't we teach incoming doctors about them? Black Americans are more likely to die in childbirth. It doesn't mean that the reason is interpersonal racism, where white doctors say, I don't care as much about black people, so I'm going to give them worse treatment. It's not that. And in fact, if it were that, it might be an easier issue to solve. It is structural to a degree. Indigenous communities have lower life expectancies. The right loves to say, that's just because they're alcoholics. That is such an oversimplification and not sufficient for the way that incoming doctors should be trained. Latino patients can face language barriers disproportionately that affect treatment. These are not political opinions. These are just medical facts. Diversity offices exist to make sure doctors are prepared to treat diverse populations. That's it. And so courses about social determinants of health, like race and poverty and environment, this helps doctors provide better care. Sometimes that might include asking future doctors to reflect, how has your identity, or how can identity shape bias or outcomes? It's not indoctrination. It's basic medical ethics. I have been outspoken against the use of extreme identity politics as a cudgel or as a way to silence people. I'm against it. That's not good. That's not what we're talking about. Here we're talking about important elements of medical education, and this bill, H.R. 3518 from Republicans, bans all of it, and it's not subtle. The bill says schools can't teach that there are systemic issues that can relate to race in the United States. They're not allowed to teach it if they want to keep any of these grants. It's a direct gag order. And it is to a degree telling future doctors, you can't even learn about care, how care became unequal. It obviously doesn't stop with medical schools. We've talked about it in other contexts already, but this particular bill pressures the agencies that do accreditation of medical schools, do not recognize degrees from medical schools that have any kind of DEI programming or commitment. So this is not about protecting civil rights. This is about erasing the ability to talk about them. And it doesn't improve education. It polices which ideas schools are allowed to teach, all from a party that says that they're about free speech and more speech in more places. So this is a disaster acutely for medical, elements of medical, but this is part of a broader effort to purge public institutions of any acknowledgement of inequality. First it was schools, then it was libraries, now it's hospitals, medical schools, etc., and tomorrow it's going to be the next thing. What Republicans are doing here is redefining reality by defunding the aspects of reality they don't like. We don't want to acknowledge that there are very disparate medical outcomes along class and racial lines. So instead of fixing the disparities, we'll just pull funding from anybody who teaches about it. And if that sounds extreme and like it doesn't exactly support speech, it's because it's extreme and it doesn't support speech. HR 3518, barely seeing coverage of it. After researching, writing, refining, The Echo Machine, my book, is finally out. This is not just a book about how American politics got so broken. It's also about what's happening right now and what we can still do to stop things from getting worse. Trump's been back in power. The results have been even more catastrophic than many feared, with targeting of political opponents and gutting democratic institutions, laying the groundwork to even further consolidate power. But the thing is that none of this is inevitable. The same forces that brought us here can be countered if we understand how they work and what to do about them. And that's what the Echo Machine is all about. Some say that without corporate media backing, books like this can't succeed. I think we can prove them wrong. You can get the Echo Machine right now at davidpakman.com/echo on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Audible, Kindle, or by calling any local bookstore and asking them to order it. This book is more important than ever. If you care about what happens next, and I do, check out The Echo Machine today at davidpakman.com/echo.